Well, thank you very much for staying with us. Now, petrol scarcity hits different parts of the country. Well, from Monday, forcing motorists to spend hours at filling stations while battling to get the product. Black marketers had a field day selling a litre of fuel as much as 300 naira to 400 naira in many parts of the country. Many motorists were also forced to patronize them as the unpalatable alternative was to wait for hours at filling stations. Amid long queues and waiting hours in Lagos, some filling stations sold a litre of PMS, as petrol premium motor spirit, for as much as 200 naira per litre, as against the approved price of between 170 naira and 180 naira per litre. Well, let's discuss this current scarcity, which is bringing hardship, of course, to Nigerians. Well, my guest, I introduced her earlier. She's a senior energy analyst with Stears Business. That's also a friend of the house, Miss Noelle Okwedy. Thank you so much, Noelle. It's good to see you. Noelle, are you there?
Yes, thank you for having me.
All right, then. It's good to have you on the show. Well, we are back at this again. We talked about this some time ago, and we are here again. It's looking like fixing the price of PMS is something that remains very difficult at this time. Your thoughts?
Yes, exactly. And that's because the price of any good is not supposed to be fixed by the government. So when you have a situation where the government is trying to impose a price that is not the market price, it brings up all sorts of inefficiency, like hoarding, scarcity, supply issues. And that's just what we're experiencing right now. It's just because the price of petrol isn't supposed to be fixed. It's supposed to move with the market forces. So as demand and supply interact, the price of petrol is also supposed to move. But with the government imposing a price, then we have it. That's why we're in this situation right now.
So we might live with this for some time. What do you think?
Yes, so if you remember, since January, we've had a number of incidents of petrol scarcity. In January, around January to March, it was because the NNPC imported contaminated petrol. At some point, petrol prices went up from 165 to in some parts of Nigeria, even 190. And now we're seeing petrol scarcity again. And all these issues are just because, so with the regulation of the petrol price, it means that petrol marketers can't recover their costs. And that means that it reduces their incentive to sell. So it leads to them hoarding the product. It leads to lower supplies in places like Lagos and Abuja. It leads to just all sorts of inefficiency. Even with the infrastructure we have, petrol infrastructure, pipelines are not in proper working condition. Even petrol stations, they are not efficient in their operations either. And that's just because they don't earn enough to cover their costs. And we're dealing with the results of that.
Well, let's be more practical about this. There is an issue around storage of PMS when the vessels berth here and moving them to the depot owners and all of that. They all have their challenges. Inflation, price of diesel, and all of this is affecting their kind of business. And they're all saying that we might not be able to maintain this. So what can be done? Is it on the part of the NNPC or on the part of the private players? Who do you think can help do something at this time?
Well, the simple solution is to remove the petrol subsidy and allow the market determine the price of petrol. Because as it is, like you mentioned, petrol transportation around Nigeria. So when petrol gets to Lagos in their Papa port, to get to places like Abuja, Port Harcourt, and other parts of the country, it's transported via trucks, and these trucks use diesel. So with diesel prices going from 300 naira to 800 naira in the past few months, that means their costs have also increased. But then you're not letting them increase, but then the price of petrol is the same. So how do these people recover their costs? It's impossible with the petrol price that is fixed by the government. And that's why the solution to all these issues of petrol scarcity, storage, transportation, cost recovery is to have a petrol price that's reflective of the cost of the industry. And that's what we don't have now. And that's why we're seeing these issues.
Sounds interesting, Noel, but let me follow up by saying some would say subsidy is not outrightly bad, if properly administered. Now, the issue is, do we really know what we consume as a nation on a daily basis? That's talking about PMS. The figures continue to increase. 60 million, 70 million, depending on where it comes from. We don't even know what actually is it. So can't we start from understanding or getting actual figures of what we consume? Then we know what subsidy we should pay. 11 trillion naira is what we are looking at for next year. How come in a budget of 20 trillion naira for a country? More than half. Did you get me?
Sorry, you said, I didn't get the last part of what you said.
Okay, I'm talking about smuggling here now. How do we manage and monitor what we consume as a nation? I think if we start with that, then we should know how much should be paid for subsidy on monthly basis or daily basis.
Thanks for that question, Lopez. So I think it's just basic economics, because you have a country, Nigeria, where petrol price is fixed at 165. Yes. And then you have neighboring countries like Benin Republic, Chad, Niger, where petrol is 300 to 500 naira. The market is there. So that means that when petrol marketers get petrol, they smuggle to all these neighboring countries because they can earn more money there. It's just simple economics, because suppliers will go where the money goes. They will go where the market goes. And that's what we're seeing with marketers with people smuggling petrol to neighboring countries where they can get more money for the same product than they would in Nigeria. And so the solution to the end of smuggling is also to remove the incentive for smuggling. And removing the incentive for smuggling is just making sure that the petrol price is the market price. So we need a price of petrol that reflects market realities, so that there's no incentive for smugglers or marketers or anybody to smuggle petrol to other countries, because they have a market that's functioning in Nigeria.
It's scary, I must tell you, Noelle, it is scary, because if we outrightly take off subsidy as at today, I don't know, you should know that better than I would know. We'll be buying fuel for as much as 300 plus, 400 naira a liter. Considering the economic situation of our country as it is at the moment, we face challenge. It's a global issue though, but Nigeria is not insulated from all of this. How do you see Nigerians taking this?
Yes, so it will not be easy at all, but Stears has done research on this and written articles about it. And one of the countries that we looked at was Indonesia, where they also had a petrol subsidy for a number of years. And they still have a petrol subsidy, but they've tried to remove it. And their most successful reform had three proper characteristics. One, there was a lot of communication. So it took over a year before they removed the subsidy. And there was just a lot of communication to the grassroots for people to understand the situation. Because like you mentioned, you have a budget where half of it is going to a petrol subsidy. That means that it's inefficient and it's taking up revenue that should be used for other reasons, for other purposes like education, healthcare, capital development, and it's just going to the subsidy that is not even benefiting the poorest of society. So the solution to that, one major solution, is just making sure that all Nigerians, all stakeholders understand the issue, understand why the subsidy has to be removed. And besides that, also bringing in some social reforms, so social packages and benefits for the poorest in society, which could be giving cash, giving food, just social benefits, so that people see that, okay, even though the subsidy has been removed, the government still cares. The government is still trying to make life easier for Nigerians. Because like you said, inflation is high, costs are high, there's flooding. There are lots of issues in Nigeria right now that will make removing the subsidy an unpopular decision by the government. But it just takes willpower, and it also takes communication and making sure that the people understand why it has to be done.
A hard one now. Let's move away from a little away from subsidy. Well, it still has one way or the other attached. Let's talk refining. Yes, we've gone this route before too, and we know that we expect the Port Harcourt refinery to come on stream anytime soon. Well, that's after $1.5 billion has been invested into total rehabilitation of that refinery. And also sometime, I think yesterday, I saw the CEO of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, Mr. Mele Kyari, signed another agreement, I think, with a South Korean firm to come fix the Kaduna refinery, I guess. Now, in your take, if we continue to fix all of these refineries and Dangote refinery also comes on stream as expected, well, is that the way to go? Are we going to be better for it than we are now? Let me ask the question that way.
Well, it depends on what you mean by better. So on the one hand, petrol will not be significantly cheaper than it is. So if we remove the subsidy and petrol goes up to, say, 500 naira, because we're importing it, if we start producing our own petrol, the price difference between 500 naira and whatever we end up charging will not be significant. And that's just because it will only discount the cost of shipping, of international shipping from where we buy our petrol from or the countries that we import petrol from. So it will not make petrol cheaper. And honestly, I don't know about it making it more efficient if they still have a subsidy or even like guaranteeing supplies if the subsidy is still there, because we'll still have these same issues of marketers trying to increase prices because their costs have gone up and the government imposing a cost and them hoarding the product. So honestly, the refineries are good. It's good that we produce our own petrol and maybe even have enough capacity to export and increase our export revenue. But it will not make petrol significantly cheaper for Nigerians.
True, because the crude will actually be sold to them at the international price rate, right?
Exactly.
So they have to work within that same figure. So it's not really like it's going to make fuel cheaper.
No.
So what do we stand to gain? Okay, we could begin to export and all of that. Well, interesting conversation always around the oil and gas space. Let's talk about crude oil theft, which is eating deep into the fabric of the economy. Of course, staring us in the eyes at the moment, affecting our finances because the NNPC cannot meet up with so many things because of oil theft. With all of these moves being made more recently by government, do you think that production could improve? And if production improves, what impact would it have? Of course, more money first.
Exactly. So if production improves, it's more money, more revenue. So right now, Nigeria has two problems. Our revenue problem, which means we're not earning enough, and that's because of oil revenue. So our oil production in January was around 1.3 million barrels per day. And in September, it was less than 900. It was just over 900,000 barrels per day, less than 1 million barrels per day. So you're seeing that Nigeria is producing less than it has produced in decades. And obviously that has an effect on our revenue. So we're not earning enough. And then we're spending too much on the petrol subsidy. And that's because oil prices have gone up. So the cost of crude oil and refined products have also gone up, like petrol, diesel, aviation fuel, everything has gone up. So Nigeria is losing from two ends. Revenue, we're not earning enough. Expenditure, we're spending too much on the subsidy. And so if we fix one of these problems, we'll be in a better position. So removing the subsidy will mean more revenue for us. And if we increase our revenue, that means more revenue for us and more investment, more spending on healthcare, education, capital projects, infrastructure, and all the things that Nigeria needs, really. So it's in our best interest for our oil production to go up because that means that we can earn more revenue and be in a better position economically.
Noelle, almost finally, I spoke earlier, my first guest, we talked about the Startup Act, and we also have one in this industry, the Petroleum Industry Act, which has taken us to the NNPC becoming a limited liability company and the NMDPRA and all of these developments that we've seen. In your thoughts, how well has the PIA impacted Nigeria's oil and gas industry?
Well, I'll say that it has had some impact, but it hasn't had as much impact as it should have. So, for instance, one major clause in the PIA was that one major section was that the downstream market should be deregulated. That hasn't been done. NNPC, as a private limited company, should not have to bear the burden of the subsidy either. So, in the past 2 months, between July and August, we saw that NNPC spent almost 100% of its revenue on the petrol subsidy. So NNPC is not even making money right now. And this is supposed to be a private limited company that's supposed to maximize profits for its shareholders. So if we're going to implement the PIA, we should implement it fully so that we can see the results. But when we're implementing partly, we have NNPC Limited, but NNPC is not maximizing profits. We still have a subsidy. All these half and half implementation measures that we're making will not let us see the impact of the PIA anytime soon.
Indeed, I think I agree with you, all of this. But let's wrap up with an outlook. Despite all of the gloomy pictures and all that we see, despite the Russia and Ukraine crisis still on, and all the developments in the UK and everywhere, what is your outlook for the oil and gas industry? Well, maybe globally now.
Yeah, so my outlook is that as much as I can predict oil prices, because you know how unpredictable they can get, but oil prices will stay high because they are rising now. So as of in the past week, oil prices have increased past $80 per barrel. Gas prices are also high because winter is approaching and there's more demand for gas than even earlier in the year. So as prices stay high, there's always an opportunity for Nigeria to make more money, because the higher the oil price, that means the more we can make if we can pump out oil and pump out gas. But the issues in our upstream sector are just inhibiting our revenue. And these are things that we need to solve immediately now that oil prices are still high, because we don't know how long this will last.
Beautiful stuff there. As usual, I've been speaking to Noelle Okwedy. She's a senior energy analyst with Stears Business. Thank you so much. It's always a nice talking to you, and do have a great weekend.
Thank you too, Lope. You too. Bye.
All right then, bye.